2 million jobs could vanish. Not in 10 years, not even 5, but in the next few months. A single tariff on India has set off a chain reaction that threatens everything from your local grocery store to the factory down the road. Washington says it's about protecting American workers. But the truth, it may be the very move that destroys them. Let's begin with the basics. Trade between the United States and India has quietly grown into one of the most important economic pipelines in the world. From the shirts on our backs to the medicine in our cabinets, Indian exports touch nearly every American household. Textiles, gems, jewelry, engineering goods, software services. Together, these account for tens of billions of dollars each year. For decades, the logic was simple. America imported labor-intensive goods from India because it was cheaper to make them there. In return, India bought American technology, defense equipment, and farm products. It wasn't a perfectly balanced partnership, but it was a stable one. Now, that balance is collapsing. The White House recently announced a 50% tariff on a wide range of Indian goods, everything from apparel to auto parts. Overnight, a market that fed small-town retailers and fueled family-owned businesses is being priced out. Washington framed this as a bold move to protect American jobs. But history tells us such moves rarely play out as advertised. Consider the past. When tariffs were slapped on Chinese goods in 2018, the hope was that U.S. manufacturing would roar back. Instead, American farmers were crushed under retaliatory tariffs. U.S. importers faced higher costs, and consumers paid more. Manufacturing jobs did not return at the scale promised. Instead, companies automated or relocated supply chains to third countries like Vietnam and Mexico. Workers were caught in the middle.
This new tariff on India is poised to repeat the same cycle, only faster and possibly on a larger scale. Why? Because India is not just another exporter. It is the world's second largest supplier of textiles, jewelry, and software services to the U.S. Removing India from that role is like tearing a key gear out of a machine. It doesn't stop smoothly, it grinds, sparks, and shatters. Already, American retailers are sounding alarms. Small clothing chains warn they can't survive if the cost of importing Indian garments doubles overnight. Jewelers who rely on Indian-cut diamonds say customers will walk away if prices spike. Even big-box stores admit their supply chains aren't ready for this shock. And here's the hidden truth. The U.S. doesn't have the factories to replace what India supplies. Decades of outsourcing have hollowed out industries like textiles. To rebuild them at home would take years, massive investment, and a workforce that no longer exists in sufficient numbers. In the meantime, jobs dependent on affordable imports, retail clerks, truck drivers, warehouse staff, are the ones at risk. That's the irony. The policy designed to protect American workers may end up destroying more of them. Estimates already suggest that up to 2 million jobs could be wiped out globally, with a significant portion inside the U.S. The layoffs wouldn't come from factories reopening in Detroit or Pittsburgh. They'd come from stores closing in Des Moines, warehouses shuttering in Texas, and exporters losing markets in California. Meanwhile, India is bracing for its own storm. Exporters from Gujarat and Punjab are pleading for government relief. The textile hubs of Surat and Ludhiana face canceled orders. Jewelry workshops in Mumbai report panic among workers who fear they'll be out of work within weeks. For India, this tariff is not just an economic hit, it's a political earthquake. Opposition leaders accuse Prime Minister Modi of being blindsided, while his government scrambles to diversify exports toward Europe and Asia. But perhaps the biggest shift isn't economic, it's geopolitical. By hammering India with tariffs, Washington risks pushing New Delhi closer to Beijing. Only months ago, the U.S. hailed India as a cornerstone of the Quad alliance, a democratic counterweight to China in Asia. Now, China sees an opening. It can offer trade concessions, deepen BRICS ties, and quietly remind India that when America punishes, Beijing can embrace. This is where the hidden danger lies, because trade is never just about numbers. It's about power. If America drives India away at the very moment it needs allies against China, then this so-called tariff to protect American workers could turn into the tariff that strengthens China's hand globally. So what comes next? If jobs are at risk on both sides, who actually wins from this conflict? And could it be that the one country celebrating this turmoil isn't India or America, but China? Let's pull the curtain back further. Who actually gets hurt first when tariffs like this hit? Not Washington politicians, not corporate giants with legal teams and offshore options. It's the people working in small businesses, the ones who rely on steady, affordable imports to survive. Picture a family-owned clothing shop in Ohio. For years, they've sourced cotton shirts and denim from Indian factories. Affordable, reliable, consistent quality. Overnight, those costs jump 50%. The owner has two choices: raise prices and lose customers, or swallow the cost and bleed money. Either way, jobs are on the chopping block. Multiply that scenario by tens of thousands of small retailers, and you start to see the scale of the problem. And then comes the supply chain domino effect. A tariff doesn't just hit one industry, it ripples outward. Truck drivers who move shipments, warehouse workers who stock goods, port employees handling containers all suddenly face fewer shipments and shorter paychecks. The shock is not limited to one sector. It spreads like cracks in a windshield, fracturing everything in its path.
Supporters of the tariff argue that this is a temporary storm, that American factories will roar back once imports slow down. But here's the catch. America no longer has the infrastructure to rebuild these industries quickly. Textile plants shuttered decades ago. Jewelry cutting never developed at scale here. Even if companies wanted to reshore, they'd run into a shortage of skilled workers. Rebuilding that capacity would take years, years that workers simply don't have. So, instead, companies automate. They replace human labor with machines. The very policy sold as job protection becomes an accelerant for automation, pushing even more American workers to the margins. History has already given us this lesson. After the US-China tariff wars, many firms didn't return home. They installed robots, streamlined processes, and cut jobs permanently. Why would it be different this time? And as American workers face layoffs, another player watches quietly: China. Every disruption between the US and India creates space for Beijing to step in. Need affordable textiles? China can deliver. Need finished electronics? China has you covered. India's lost export markets could tilt toward China, reinforcing its dominance in global supply chains. Worse still, the diplomatic fallout could shift strategic alliances. India has been a reluctant but essential partner in US efforts to contain China. Now, feeling betrayed by Washington, New Delhi may lean harder into BRICS, deepen ties with Moscow, or accept Beijing's trade overtures. That's not just an economic loss. It's a geopolitical earthquake. A world where India drifts from Washington is a world where China's influence only grows. Let's not forget the political theater inside the US either. Tariffs make for great campaign slogans. Protecting American jobs sounds powerful at a rally. But when Main Street starts to hurt, when stores close, when prices rise, when layoffs stack up, the political cost becomes undeniable. The same workers who were promised protection may be the ones marching in anger.
So where does this end? There are three main scenarios. Scenario 1, the quick climb down. Washington and Delhi negotiate a face-saving deal. The tariffs are reduced, India shifts some purchases to American goods, and the crisis cools. This is the optimistic outcome. But it requires both leaders to compromise, which recent history shows is unlikely. Scenario 2, the long grind. The tariffs hold. India retaliates with counter-tariffs on American exports. Farmers in the Midwest feel the squeeze. Retailers and consumers across America suffer higher costs. India redirects trade to Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The US-India relationship erodes. Beijing benefits most. Scenario 3, the geopolitical realignment. This is the most dangerous. India, fed up with US pressure, actively embraces China's economic orbit. Beijing becomes the buyer of choice for Indian exports. India slows cooperation with the US on defense and security. Washington finds itself isolated in Asia, facing not one rival, but two. Which scenario will unfold? No one can say with certainty. But history suggests that tariff wars rarely end quickly and almost never deliver the promised benefits. They create short-term pain, long-term distortions, and unintended winners. And that's the irony at the heart of this crisis. A tariff billed as protection could end up being destruction. 2 million jobs, American and Indian alike, hang in the balance. The price spikes will hit households. The supply chaos will hit businesses. And in the background, Beijing waits, quietly celebrating the fallout. So the question isn't just whether this tariff was wise policy. The real question is, has Washington just handed China the greatest gift it could ask for without firing a shot?